Chael Sonnen. Hey, it's Troy from the Evergreen State. I was noticing that fighters seem to get injured a hell of a lot more than they used to. We're always hoping and praying, especially for the Khabib Tony fight. Just any big fight. Why are there more injuries? Is there any way to stop? It's nonsense. I just want the fights to go through. Thanks for the content.
Yeah, injuries is a real tough one. I mean, you see that all the time, and it seems to happen in all sports, not just MMA, but MMA does have a little bit of a stigma of letting some of those owies affect you more. I mean, in most sports, in a lot of sports, you wrap it up, you tape it up, and you go out there. Now, the other side is you tape it up and you wrap it up and you tough it out for a little bit, and then you tell coach, hey, take me out, put somebody else in, let me ice this thing. Okay, put me back in for a few plays. I get where it's a little bit different, but MMA guys do seem to have a little bit more of a need to go into the competition feeling right. They're well aware that 60 seconds into that competition, they're going to feel terrible. The 8 minutes and 12 minutes and 15 minutes in, they're only going to feel worse. They're well aware of that, and they're more than happy to put all of that risk out there. They're more than happy to have to go see the trainer or even end up in the hospital for the night. They're even proud of it. They'll take pictures of themselves getting stitched up in the back or in the hospital gown after the fact and send it out on social media, but they won't walk out there feeling that way. There's just something about that approach where they go, listen, this is a hard enough thing to do, and I've got to walk out there as close to 100% as possible. There seems to be a very real phenomenon about that. I don't know if I fully agree with some of the injuries, and I don't want to ever call somebody a faker. That's not true. There are times I will call somebody a faker. For the point of right now, I don't want to call somebody a faker, but boy, there's some of these kids that, man, toughen up. Literally, toughen up. You're in the hurt business. The rules quite literally say, I don't say there was any kind of bravado or any kind of toughness. They literally say do damage to your opponent. I mean, those are very strong words. So toughen up. I've been in MMA in gyms since 2000. Been in a wrestling room since I was 9 years old. I could tell you how many injuries I've seen on one hand. And there have been injuries. There have been guys that have been hurt. My 33 years of doing it, I have definitely seen it. But I could only tell you on one hand. It's not that common. It's just not. To have an owie or not feel good, yeah, sure. See that all the time. Everybody watching this video sees that all the time. Does that mean you don't show up for work? Come on, man.
Hey, Uncle Chael, Jeremy here up in Canada. Love the show, love the amount of content. So here it is. I say George St-Pierre beats the crap out of Israel Adesanya. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, you didn't give me a whole lot to work with there, but I don't think it's bad for you to bring up because as this St-Pierre sweepstakes is kind of going around, St-Pierre is very in love with the idea of 155 pounds. But to act as though St-Pierre, who is a small middleweight, but a middleweight champion of the world nonetheless, then you're talking about Adesanya, who's a small middleweight. No matter how many times he tries to tell you how big he is, he's not. I know Adesanya. He's not. He trains with Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker's 155 pounder. Okay, Adesanya's not this huge guy. But they have a clash in styles. They're both at the same weight. And I see the classicness of that in the striker heavy Adesanya and the grappling heavy St-Pierre. I see the classic matchup there. I have never given this any consideration because I've always bought into George's theory that if he comes back, he's only going to come back at 155 pounds. And I can tell you Adesanya versus St-Pierre is never going to happen because Dana's never going to bring George St-Pierre back in to a world title fight in a situation like George could do to him like he did last time, which is to grab the belt and walk away from it. I think it would be fun. And I don't think that a champion walking away from the title is quite the insult or quite the PR mess or quite the divisional mess that the boss does. I see that all as talking points, and I've always had a little bit of fun with that. But he's not going to do it. We can talk about all we want. He's not going to do it. Those two are not going to fight. But I see what you did there. And I like the booking.
Okay, I've got a fun question. So if you could see any fight between any two current fighters in any sport under any set of rules, what is that dream matchup that you would put together? I'm going to go ahead and say mine is Francis Ngannou versus Deontay Wilder in boxing with MMA gloves. What's yours?
Okay, so I will go mixed martial arts, unified rules. I will go with MVP, Michael Venom Page, versus George Masvidal. I would put MVP versus George Masvidal somewhere on my list. You're probably going to push back on that. Now, I want to see that fight because of the X's and O's. I would be very interested in the punches and kicks and how each guy approached each other. I am aware that that isn't what makes for a really big fight, and I'm aware that you're probably going to think that your booking was better than mine. So now I'll just give you a mega fight so that I can satisfy that end of your question as I perceive it. And I'll give you St-Pierre versus Conor McGregor. Unified rules.
Hey, Chael. Clay here from Vancouver. So I just have a quick question regarding a possible matchup, because I know there's a lot of talk about what could happen to McGregor if he loses against Cowboy. An option that popped into my head is Max Holloway said that he didn't necessarily want to rematch Volkanovski right away. He's still unsure. What if McGregor loses to Cowboy? How would you feel about Holloway versus McGregor at 155? Could be a good rematch.
Well, I certainly don't disagree with you. Look, Conor McGregor and fighting Max Holloway is simply never going to happen. Ever, 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 ever again. It's just simply not. And the people that enjoyed that match, good for you. It's archived. Please go back and rewatch it. But that's as close as you're ever going to get to that. For many reasons. But one of the reasons that fight isn't going to happen and doesn't make any sense to happen is both of those guys are world title challengers. Now, this is before I even get into the fact that Max is a 45-pounder and Conor is a 55-pounder. Before I even get into the fact that they're not in the same weight class, you do have to understand all Conor is going to be doing is fighting for championships. Right? He's going to be marquee main event fights and fighting for world championships. By world championship, please give me a little bit of room. There has to be something very special and spectacular there. But he's not going to go wipe another guy out, right? If Max and Conor were to go at it, Max was to go to 55. Just to give you an example, you've got two top contenders, but one thing that you are admitting to before the fight happens is one of these guys is done. One of these guys gets an eraser next to their name as far as the race goes for getting into a championship match. And it's just not a really good habit to go out and burn one guy to put another guy over when they're both already stars. It's a totally different story when they're both trying to become stars and your roads have to cross. Can get pretty competitive in that field. But once they're both already established, doing a fight like that just doesn't make any level of sense. And I got to tell you, I'm very stunned at how many people have been calling for this fight. You're not alone. I'm not scolding you in the least. You are in very good company. So many people do bring that up. And I will tell you, those voices are very loud and they're very passionate, but they're also very few. That's not a mega fight. It wasn't a mega fight the night that it happened. They both went on their own paths to stardom. To Max going on and doing everything you could possibly do at featherweight. Everything. And his story is just beginning. Max and featherweight and championships, it's just beginning. Conor's is now at 155 pounds. Sometimes it's at 170 pounds. Sometimes it's over in the sport of boxing. Conor versus Max is never going to happen. And for the few people that want to see it, I realize you want to see it super bad and you're passionate about it. Go watch it on replay.
Hey Chael, this is Oscar here, huge fan from Spain. And I wanted to ask you about Donald Cerrone because I've seen that he has lost against many southpaws in his career, like Nate Diaz, RDA, Leon Edwards, Darren Till. And I wanted to ask you if maybe his style ain't that useful against a southpaw because maybe his switch kick is not that useful as against an orthodox fighter, or if you have any other assessment on the matter. Love your channel, keep it up.
Well, Donald Cerrone has a lot of ways to win a fight. And while some of that could be true early in his career, I mean, don't forget, those guys that you just mentioned, it wasn't just a southpaw factor. Those guys you just mentioned are straight up killers, and so is Cowboy. But when you go out and you play a shootout game, let's just go and break one of those fights down specifically, and let's make it the Darren Till fight, okay? Darren Till had a few advantages on Cowboy that nobody knew until hindsight. And first off is nobody knew who the hell Darren Till was. He was 25 years old. He had never fought on television before. All of a sudden, he's thrown into a main event. On paper, you go read about him, you ask a couple guys in the hey, you know anything about this guy? I mean, that's how it kind of works if you're Cowboy. Hey, you know this guy? Have you worked out with this guy? You make a couple phone calls. He's a striker. Okay. Well, Cowboy's a master striker. He's not going to be afraid to go and fight, some young kid that's getting propelled into this high-level spot, first 5-round atmosphere, main event. I mean, everything was against Till. If you're a Cowboy, you know that. Oh, and by the way, everything I've heard about this guy, he likes to play my game. He's going to stand up on his feet. He's not going to try to take me down. Well, that's what Till did. It just turned out that Till was so awkward and so dynamic. I mean, when you get in one of those gunfights with a guy, it's very easy to fall down. So I only offer you that because I do feel that a little bit has been made of this southpaw business as it relates to Cowboy. I do see that where some of those losses were to southpaws, but I don't know that that's the big commonality that they had shared together as much as they were just all really great fighters. They got the jump, they got to the target ahead of time, but some of them did have a surprise factor to it. Cowboy is not going to be surprised by Conor. He knows exactly what he's getting into. And we'll see in hindsight. Just because you know doesn't always mean you can deal with it. But when you're dealing with the southpaw of Conor, which is what everybody keeps talking about, and I do admit that left hand is just flat scary, period. There are ways to nullify a southpaw. If that's the only weapon that you're worried about, you're willing to take anything else he got, but you've got to laser focus on that one weapon. So you're not going to be distracted by some of this. You're not going to be distracted by some of the movements. You're watching one weapon. If that's what Cowboy does, he's going to be able to avoid it.
Uncle Chael, what's going on, buddy? My name's Brandon. I'm out here in Minnesota. I got one question for you about the McGregor and Cerrone fight. Do you think that it's possible that McGregor might try to take Cerrone to the ground and submit him just to prove everyone wrong? Because everyone obviously thinks, including you, that he's going to take his left hand and knock him out in the first round, or at least try to. And then everyone else thinks that, Cerrone might try to gas him out, tire him out, and then, beat on him from there. But I got to know, because all of his media has been wrestling. He's still got a chip on his shoulder from Khabib. Do you think that he's going to try to shock the world and submit this guy?
No, I most certainly don't. There would be no evidence of that. I don't know that I disagree with the surprise factor that you bring up to make everybody guess all of a sudden or make everybody see some new skill set. But no, it largely doesn't work that way. I mean, look, don't forget this. This isn't a matter of Conor stays on his feet because he wants to stay on his feet or he's better at that. He doesn't really have the option to take Cowboy down. I am very comfortable in telling you that. No matter what Conor has done in the practice room or how he's been preparing for this fight that we haven't seen, and no matter how grappling heavy that was or even wrestling heavy that it was, there has not been enough time for him to all of a sudden be this advanced wrestler based on where he was, okay? Offensively. Defensively is a totally different story. Some of the defensive wrestling that Conor was doing against Khabib, while ultimately it failed, was very good. And he showed some real progress for that. But I'm talking offense, and there's two different forms of wrestling, particularly as you carry it over to MMA. Offense versus defense, two totally different things. But you're talking about offense. You're talking about, can Conor go out there, close the distance, get a hold of Cowboy, get his hands locked, get control of his hip, something along these lines, take him down to the ground. Oh, by the way, once he gets him there, then move into submission. No, I'm very comfortable in telling you no, that neither one of those skill sets is possessed within Conor. Close the distance, get a hold of Cowboy, and to take him down is not a skill he possesses. But then even if he was to get him there and start to look for some of those submissions, I don't think so. I mean, Conor's pretty direct in his approach, and I'm well aware that he trains everything, and he's very skilled on the ground. Dylan Dennis even vouches for him in terms of his submission skills. But to make believe that that's going to be better than Cowboy's skills, who happens to be bigger than him, by the way, that's a leap that I'm not willing to make.